So today, for the Pathmark Presents episode of the day, I'm with Joe Sinkwitz from Intellifluence. And, I want to give you just a little bit of an insight of what the folks are doing over there. Essentially, what they are doing, they're making intelligent influencer marketing easy. We know it can be super difficult to find, whatever your budget might be, whatever you're actually looking for to, define the right route through the jungle of influencer marketing. So Joe and his team are there to guide you and support you. So Joe is the co-founder and CEO of the company, and he loves to solve problems like every other SaaS CEO out there. So we're going to be talking a lot about problem solving today, as we're talking about what we love to talk in a Pathmark Presents podcast a lot. So Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Very good. So maybe in your own words, what is Intellifluence all about?
Sure. So Intellifluence it's obviously in the influencer marketing industry. What makes us unique is that we're the largest of the warm contact influencer networks, meaning that, over the 100,000 plus influencers that we list, they've all physically signed up to work with us, with brands and their agencies. So it sort of puts us in a special position for those looking to skip cold outreach when working with influencers on a campaign basis. And it's all done through a SaaS.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. That is very succinct. It makes it very easy to understand what you guys are doing. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the company. How long have you guys been around? Who would be the people using you guys? Maybe you can give us an insight.
Sure. So we've been around since 2016. So we're now in our fifth year. I've been in digital marketing for 24 years now. So I've been in this long slog getting to where we currently are. While, the people who would benefit the most, while we have a wide variety of use cases due to the stance of being network agnostic, because we support everything from Amazon and blogs to those traditional social networks like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, the brands that seem to have the most success with us are the ones that have an idea already about how they want to interact with influencers. So what I mean by that is, brands, if they know they're looking for someone to help augment their branded account performance as a KPI, or they're looking to seek engagement on existing web assets as a KPI, or they're looking to do brand reach, traffic, sales, having that KPI in mind is, though we're able to help them the best because we tailor via our campaign wizardry, technology to a specific KPI. So if they already know what they want to do, we're able to help match them the best with influencers.
Very cool. That actually is there's a question there that actually came up within the team prior to this interview was obviously for a lot of people, influencer marketing means very B2C driven focus, right? Like fitness, health, fashion. Like, what's your experience? Does B2B have a role there?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I've written a book on influencer marketing and how to use it as a brand as well as an influencer. B2B does have a role. It tends to be more difficult, right? Because it's that use case. But at the end of the day, we're still trying to get in front of a particular person. So if you understand who that end buyer is within the business organization, you're still able to understand their overall buying persona. You're able to get into their mind, who influences them, what are they looking at, what are they reading. In terms of the networks and focus, you're probably not going to do a lot of B2B Instagram or something that's really disposable. You might need a little bit more of hand holding and longer play of cultivating a lead before purchase. Maybe that's the whole buyer's journey Pathmark does. So in that case, a lot of B2B that comes to us, they're doing long explainer videos on YouTube, embedding those within blogs, getting those blogs shared out on Twitter and on LinkedIn, and then taking that and trying to amplify it even further. So there's different steps to it with B2B. It does get a little bit more complex and difficult. Like you talk health. Health is a great example because nutrition is a gigantic market within influencer marketing. We do really well there. Sometimes people come in and say, I need to work with only doctors and I need to be able to get in front of them. That's a lot harder. So it's being able to step through and say, okay, why do I feel I need to hit this particular segment? Is there another way that I can get in front of those doctors without specifically having doctors recommend to each other?
Yep. Makes a lot of sense. Super interesting. I would be curious though, the individuals that are getting started with Intellifluence, like how do they actually find you guys? Like what is a typical journey that somebody goes through? We talked about the buying journey. If we flip it back on Intellifluence, like what is the steps that somebody goes through? Like what would be the typical client acquisition channels?
Yeah, so like a lot of SaaS companies, we have several points of entry for user acquisition purposes. Because my background was more in organic SEO, that's obviously a channel of importance to us. However, we're also big believers in our own product, and we designed it because we needed it ourselves for a project in particular. So therefore, we created a series of digital flywheels that allow us to use our own influencers and brands across a bunch of different social platforms that we support in order to pull in those curious brands. And like finally, we have business development arrangements. So a decent chunk of our clients also come through those channel partners.
Very cool. So it's a good mix there, what I'm hearing. You brought up obviously SEO and the flywheels. Like what role does the website play in all of those?
Well, I mean, it obviously plays a pretty big role because we have our content marketing strategy that we execute on. We have the strategy associated with the influencer profiles themselves, the various offers that are allowed to be public, how to use those as particular lead magnets, how do we go about getting widgetry embedded into additional sites. So the website plays a very critical role because we are a SaaS company that's web app driven. It's the only role if you really think about it.
Very good. No, makes a lot of sense. We talk a lot about websites actually here in the Pathfinder Presents podcast to learn a little bit, sort of what are the worries, but also the strengths of websites. Like for that matter, where do you see the strength of your current website? The
strength? Well, I mean, it's a fairly fast site. We've designed it with an accomplished product marketing team from CopyPress, because that's another part of the backgrounds of my current business partner, Eric Kaufman. So we have a fairly product-driven website that doesn't try to be too salesy. It just tries to ease people in with education. So whenever we find ourselves encountering a question that comes up repeatedly, we try to make sure that we're building it into an FAQ somewhere so it could be gobbled up, rich snippets, be executed within search, and we have something that's able to very quickly point to versus typing out an answer all the time.
Makes sense. On the flip side, though, I love to ask, especially CEOs can be super critical of their own websites. Like, where do you see room for improvement?
Well, I mean, as we all know, within those that are in the search marketing industry, May is going to be a critical update for largest contentful paint. First, time first byte, looking at the first byte, time coming in, and then the one that's the ire of many is the cumulative layout shift. So anyone that's built on like Avada as a theme is now struggling to just make tiny tweaks to CSS. That's probably like the thing that bothers me the most. I like the design, I like the flow, I like how we're pushing people through. The speed continually gets better because we're optimized for that. I'd say maybe a little bit of layout shifting. Otherwise, I'm pleased with it. I just want more.
More what?
Everything. More traffic, more of the content people want, more of the interviews that we do with our influencers, more of the brand strategy stuff that we do with some of our brands that consent to being highlighted. Just that everything is working. I think if there's anything holding us back, it's just pouring gasoline on the fire.
Makes a lot of sense. Coming back to the product, actually. So since you mentioned it's, the flow is working for everybody who's listening in, what would you say is the main competitive advantage? When they head over to your website, sign up and get started with a product, what is it that they're getting that they typically wouldn't be getting?
Well, I mean, as a bootstrap company, we're able to price things very inexpensively. It is year 5, of course. And while we're the largest, the warm contact networks, which is usually the selling point, we're also able to provide like the largest dollar to influencer reach out there, simply because we have the most real influencers. We tend to be on the lower side of our pricing model, so we're just able to provide that much value.
Very, very cool. I'd love to talk a little bit with you about digital growth and marketing, right? What's the biggest challenge that comes to your mind when I say the word innovation in marketing?
Well, I mean, the biggest challenge with regards to innovation is we tend to take it for granted, right? Everyone wants to copy their competition almost reflexively, and that's not always the best idea. Sometimes the best innovation just comes from listening to your customers. So we have a lot of homegrown tech within our own system, a lot of what we might call trigger points, where the system tries to guide people based on the previous actions they took or did not take, what the outcome of those actions was. So some of the innovation that we find is it goes in unexpected ways, and we have to recalculate the logic. We have to look back and say, well, why did the user choose to do this? You know, why are they moving this in this area? That same type of innovation plays out in marketing as well. We have to be able to look at the channels and say, well, you know what? You were not going to have enough time to focus on every single new social network that jumps out of there. Do I have time to spend, you know, hours and hours on Clubhouse? I do not, and therefore I've held off on that. But some of the innovation sometimes comes from just seeing an existing channel and recognizing that the tried and true still works, and then doubling down on it. Like people that ignore blog posts still as a decent marketing strategy. I try to write on a lot of different platforms simply because it extends voice. And while it can be a drag because it's such a time commitment, there is innovation in recognizing strategies that have continued to work in the past and just doubling down on them.
Super. I mean, this is super insightful. Very, very good. What comes to mind when I say, and in terms of challenges in marketing, when I say return on investment?
Ooh, return on investment is a challenge. Well, I mean, because the background, my initial thought goes to PPC, you know, where I think, oh, if I spend $100, I want to make sure I get at least $101 back. But that's more of a return on ad spend. But that tends to be how I view that phrasing. Within like technology return on investment, I'm a big believer in making incremental improvements daily to any aspect of the business. But the goal is like 1% improvement. Doesn't matter if it's on the content, if it's on the product itself, it's on the sales team, whatever it might be. Making those slight improvements over time yields like a compounded improvement overall to the business. So I view ROI a little different. If I feel like we're going in the right direction and in the right overall direction, and it's something that, you know, one of the team wanted to spend time on because they personally believed it was important, I want to let them do it. So that my return on investment happens to be also on employee growth.
Super cool. One last one of those sort of like formative questions would be, what's the biggest challenge that comes to mind when I say the word conversion optimization?
Well, I think we don't try to qualify new leads before they purchase because, you know, there's challenges that arise in determining what's the next best steps for someone. There's a constant evolution in their underlying logic. You know, does it make sense for a brand to consider, you know, what they're doing? We try to allow everyone into the system. So like, are you a Fortune 500? Everyone wants them, right? You know, us included. So we support them with like a SaaS plan plus managed plan. However, it's like those new brands, you know, they just launched a Shopify store last week and not everyone really wants those leads, but we do. So we're able to price it really low and we throw out free trials at everyone. I think that's how I sort of view like conversion optimization. Like I'm very happy to run like a hybrid freemium setup that guides people and let them know like there's no moat around the castle. Our conversion optimization is just to reduce as much friction as we possibly can, you know, pre-purchase, even though they don't really have to purchase to get in, as well as post-use. Like that's like the biggest thing that I do as the CEO is where can we reduce friction anywhere in our process to let them know that we make it extremely easy to use us, as well as extremely easy to leave us if they don't like it. And because we're product driven is like a growth, you know, concept that plays dividends with the flywheels that I mentioned earlier.
Very cool. Now I'm going to make it hard because a lot of the individuals learning quite a bit from the interviews. I would be curious if you could only focus on one thing, right, in order to improve the marketing as we were just discussing. What would be the one thing that you would focus on? Is it the roadmap, new growth initiatives, the messaging, or the reporting? Where would you put your focus?
The roadmap is solid right now. I think I would just focus on the execution of the roadmap. Messaging can always be improved, of course, and that comes like when we were talking about, the system triggers as they look for what the brand is actually doing and why they chose that path. Messaging does matter quite a bit, and like guiding them back, like, well, maybe you should do this instead. You're going to have a lot more success. So messaging matters. I hate focusing on just one thing. I'll go back. Executing the roadmap. We already have the roadmap, just making sure it gets done.
Very good. I really appreciate it. Very cool. I want to switch gears a little bit and learn about you as a leader in the company.
Sure.
Where do you actually consume content, right? You have a very busy schedule. I'm pretty sure, where do you choose your time? Where do you choose to invest time in order to educate yourself further? What are the sort of the platforms?
Sure. I guess it depends on the type of subject. I do try to be a voracious reader. So a majority of what I read in terms of books tends to be historical in nature or hard science. I don't really read a lot of business books. When it comes to online, I have a group of friends over time where I'll still follow a lot of the material and research papers that they put out on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and consume those in my spare time. When it comes to plans and ideas, a lot of that just comes from the data, just from us taking a look, how are our competitors performing within the particular platforms? How are we performing in the platforms? Where are the areas that we have gap analysis, where it's looking at Ahrefs or market brew or whatever it might be, and then feeding that into the overall roadmap of here's the product piece we know we need to build, here's the additional growth lever that we can push once it's created. Very
good. Since we're slowly coming to an end of the interview, I want to jump into our rapid fire questions. They're a little bit of a surprise for the guests. Are you ready for those?
Okay. Yep.
What's the last book that you read?
It was actually The Age of Influence by Neil Schaefer.
Very cool. What's the one single thing that your company is focused on the most at the moment?
Pushing pull requests out of Git.
Very good. If there would be no boundaries in technology, what's the one thing that you would want to have fixed for the company?
I would want to fix the way that payments are handled internationally across every platform.
I'm with you. I'm with you. What's the last thing that kept you awake at night about the company?
The last thing that kept me awake was 2 nights ago. It had to do with a third-party crawler that struggled with our site, and I couldn't determine whether it was our site or the crawler, and it turned out to be their issue. So thankfully, it was fine.
Very last question would be, if today would be the very first day you working on Intellifluence, what's the one advice that you would give yourself?
If today was my first day working on Intellifluence, I'd say go into Zendesk and just start working the support tickets. That's the best way to learn any product, just to get into the weeds and deal with the problems that you are encountering from real customers.
Very cool. Joe, I really appreciate that you took the time with us today on Pathfunk Presents. I want to give you the last word. If somebody would be forgetting everything that we discussed, what's the one thing that they should remember about Intellifluence?
I think the one thing you should remember is you can just go to Intellifluence.com, get a free month, play with it. We're very affordable. We're very friendly and easy to work with. We're also the largest of our type of influencer marketing network. So we're going to be around for a long time.
Thanks a lot for being on the show, Joe.
Thank you for having me.